Those files need to be released. And I understand that heads will roll and that reputations will be tarnished. But what about those girls, man? Like, how do you allow somebody's reputation to trump, pun intended, over the little girls that suffered? And to not release those files is criminal. I don't care what you say. There's nothing you can tell me that will ever change my mind to suggest that those files shouldn't be released.
Welcome to the Family Office, planning for the people who matter most.
So you want to talk about next?
I should probably talk about because it's fresh right now with the Epstein stuff going on right now. Now, I mean, I'm a little torn on this. And I'm a little torn just simply because this has been a big thing. It's been a big problem. And I don't want to say it's a big problem, but it's been a big distraction for a lot of people. And I think it's a distraction. I know I sent you an episode of a different podcast to listen to. And he talks specifically about that, why that is in there. I think there's a lot of distractions, but I think it's a problem, and here's why. I think it's becoming a big problem again, and it's surfaced its head, and it's not going away again, because transparency was one of the biggest issues leading into the Trump election, right? Or I don't want to say the Trump election, but this latest election cycle. Mm-hmm. Transparency was the biggest issue with the Biden administration. Trump has brought back a lot of transparency by and far in this, but now all of a sudden we get to the Epstein stuff and it's becoming a point of non-transparency again. And I don't understand why, obvious reasons. And the timing just looks weird for me with Musk and the breakdown with Musk. And if you look at an interview that Trump and Musk did a few months ago, like the early part of the years, the biggest issue they were going to have, and Donald Trump said it himself, was they're going to try to break us up, right? Or we want to make sure we stay together, we don't get broken up. And then kind of almost you see like that was the reason why there was a point of contention between Trump and Musk. I just don't understand why we're not transparent about the Epstein files. I just don't understand. Release them, put it all out there. We promise full transparency. I don't understand why. And it only makes you think one reason why we wouldn't be transparent on it. Other than two reasons why I don't think it's transparent. Number one, because your name's in it and you don't want your name to be in it in whatever capacity. Or number two, there's so much damaging stuff on so many people that are in so high network or high profile positions that if we did release it, everything would fall apart. I'm curious to know where your position is on that line. Being the left-leaning person on here, I being the right-leaning person, I want to know your perspective on it.
Yeah, so it's interesting because you have different people like the director of the FBI, Kash Patel, talking about release the Epstein files. And then you have Pam Bondi saying, we have the Epstein files right here. And you have these influencers that are on TV talking about, we've got the files, and they're there and they're parading these files around. And Epstein it's a huge issue because there is so much damage that have been done to the girls. Like, people are not talking about the little girls, the underage women that went through all of this hell and this trauma. And so when you have any presidency, I don't care Republican or Democrat, when you're talking about underage children, like even in prison, like that's one of the no-nos. Like if you find out that somebody went to jail and they're a pedophile, like they don't want to they don't want to bend over. They don't want to have the soap fall to the ground, if you understand what I'm saying. And so when you look at in a big way, in a big way. Yeah, absolutely. And I say that because, unfortunately, I have people that I know that have been locked up. And the reality is, man, they do not like pedophiles. And I don't care if you're conservative or if you're in prison, people don't like sex offenders. They don't like pedos.
You don't mess with the kids.
Nah, man, that's off limits. That's off limits. And so when you have people like Patel and Bondi, and you even have JD Vance talking about releasing the files, and all of these people are talking about these files are supposed to be released. And all of a sudden the script flips almost overnight. And it feels like something was found in those files that seem particularly damaging. But what's in my mind is that, okay, there were people that had access to these files. Why didn't you read through it before you say that you're going to release them, especially when you had access to them? And when you look at all of the pictures that Trump had with Epstein, it just makes you wonder. And I'm not saying that he was one of the perpetrators, because I don't know, so I don't have any right to say that. But it does make you wonder, because you see footage of him at parties with him, and you can tell they're having conversations, and Donald Trump is whispering into his ear, and, Epstein is smiling, and he's being, Trump is the alpha in the conversation, and Epstein is the beta in the conversation. And obviously there's, Trump has power. And so when I think about where this whole debacle is leading, you got to be held into account, and you have to let the chips fall where they may. Those files need to be released. And I understand that heads will roll and that reputations will be tarnished. But what about those girls, man? Like, how do you allow somebody's reputation to trump, pun intended, over the little girls that suffered? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me, bro. And so when we talk about, wanting to protect the integrity of these people and protect the identity, you weren't thinking about that when you were screwing some girl on the island. You weren't thinking about that. Now, let me present the flip side of the coin, what I'm thinking about. I also want to be sober and not emotional to jump to the conclusion that just because your name is on the file, that doesn't necessarily mean that you were a pedophile. That doesn't necessarily mean that you were engaging in sexual misconduct with little girls, right? But it does allow you to be questioned. It does suggest that you know something. It does suggest that you may have insider information that can help bring the people who are the perpetrators to justice. And to not release those files is criminal. I don't care what you say. There's nothing you can tell me that will ever change my mind to suggest that those files shouldn't be released. Yes, protect the names and of the innocent. For sure, you can redact all of their names, but the perpetrators and the people that were there and any incriminating information, that needs to be released to the public, because we, as a country, I honestly, I didn't vote for Trump, but that doesn't mean that I don't want him as a president to be successful. So I want every president to be successful, whether I voted for you or not, because we live in America, man. And I want this country to succeed. But right now, it's a failed presidency right now because of what's going on right now with those Epstein files, because it's the principle of the thing. And when you say one thing and you don't do it, then you lose trust and you lose credibility with me. And once that's gone, it's very difficult to get it back.
I mean, normally I wouldn't take such a hard, I'm not going to go so far as to say, failed presidency. I think that's, and I can see the emotion with you on that one. But what it does affect me a lot on that is that you can't run on a core foundational principle of transparency and then dismiss that as not a fact or not something to be transparent about. Because then it creates such an incongruency for someone like me, because now I have a hard time supporting everything else. You get what I mean? Because
yes.
Now it's like, wait a minute, hold on. We can't pick and choose what we're going to be transparent about. We're either transparent about everything or we're not, or we can't do that. Because that was the biggest problem with the Biden administration was it was just shut up, do your freaking job, which is what we tell you to do, and wait, and we'll tell you everything, right?
And don't ask questions.
Don't ask questions, because we know better than you, right? And that And I'm not saying bringing up Biden administration to compare in this type of situation, and I'm not saying that there's any comparison, because there isn't any comparison, right? But it really roadblocks me a lot, and it roadblocks a lot of people, I think, quite frankly, where it's like, bro, like, you're transparent on everything else and you're a pit bull about everything else. Why are you not a pit bull about this? Like, what? You can't dismiss it as silly and it's a joke and then throw it into the same narrative as the Russian collusion hoax and all that, which we know were all bullshit. We all know that those were all BS. We know that was already crap. But now what's becoming crap to me is that you're not disclosing this. So it makes it very, it makes you go like this, huh?
Right.
And I understand that. I understand there's a lot of nuance with it. It just, to me, I don't, and I know that the videos of him and the pictures with him partying and all that stuff back in it's probably like what, the late 90s or
probably 90s. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That doesn't really bug me or concern me much, because it's like, oh, they're hanging, because it was the Wild West back then.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And they were in the same circles. They were hanging out in the same circles. And especially back then, Trump was on Oprah. He was on
he was everywhere.
What was it? Joy Behar, like, she was so nice.
Boxing matches, beauty pageants. He was everywhere.
He was
reality TV. If it was entertainment, he was there. So, so I don't, like I said, those pictures in my mind and that video with Epstein, that's not an indictment. Like, my mind doesn't say that
because he was rolling with Michael Jackson. Just as much.
I mean, Michael Jackson. Oh yeah,
and we
exactly.
all know.
Well,
right?
hey,
so
I'm not. Hey, you got to leave Michael alone. That's another conversation.
I'm a big fan.
But here's the interesting thing, though. So for me, with Trump, it's. I'm not surprised, because I've always had the belief that he's a narcissist and he is out for himself. And if the agenda or what he needs to be transparent about aligns with what he wants, then it's okay to be transparent. And so this stays in alignment with that. So what he talked about, for example, remember there was a press conference and somebody asked about the Epstein files and Pam Bondi was getting ready to answer the question. And then he stopped. He was taking up for his people. And I respect that as a leader. Take up for your people. And he's like, look, you don't have to answer that. Are you still talking about Epstein, that creep? And then he's like, why are you still talking about that? And so as he's saying that, I'm thinking, but you're the same guy that's still talking about the previous election 4 years later, and you're the president, and you're still concerned about that. You still talk about that hoax, and you still talk about Russia collusion and all of that stuff. And so for you to bring up something that your own administration and your own people within your cabinet is saying the Epstein files need to come out and the Epstein files are going to come out, and then you take over and now you're in power and you have all of the opportunities to release the files. And now all of your folks are lining up to say there's no there. That makes no sense to me. But what it does make sense is that it aligns up with the fact that if it doesn't benefit him directly, it's not a part of his agenda and he's ready to move on. But the difference is that his own base is saying, no, buddy, for the very first time. It's going to be very interesting to see how this all unfolds, because even red meat MAGA is saying, we're not letting this go, buddy. I'm sorry. We're not letting it go. And I love that. I never thought that I would agree with the Marjorie Taylor Greene, but you know what? That for me, I don't care who you are. You may have issues that I agree with or disagree with, but I don't look at you and make one blanket assumption about everything that comes out of your mouth. I take you for what you're worth. If Marjorie Taylor Greene says, hey, you know what? He needs to release those files. I respect her for that. And I love the fact that she's asking him and calling out her colleagues to release the files. I respect that. She's a fighter.
I don't think that this is just my gut. I don't think that. I think the worst of it is that he may have been a passenger on a manifest list, probably, because he does.
He was would you say that again? He was a passenger.
I think the worst of the situation is that he probably is a passenger on a manifest list.
Okay, gotcha.
And
you're talking about Trump specifically, right?
Yes, Trump specifically. Yes.
Okay.
Because he does go. He said it a few times where he said he found out what he was doing, but they talk a little bit. They have a relationship a little bit in the early 90s or the late 80s or late 90s, early 2000s. But then after that first time that Epstein became whatever, Trump really wasn't associated with him at all. Right? I mean, there's not a lot of.
You're talking about in 2009 when he was indicted, 2008, 2009 when he was indicted.
Trump distanced himself from him.
Yeah.
Because there's not a lot of new stuff of that with him, right?
Yeah.
I don't think Trump's a pedophile. I don't think Trump did any of that weird stuff. He just, I don't think any of that.
I don't either. But why? Why they do the 180? That's the part that I don't get. What's your theory about that? Please.
Was he a playboy? Is he a playboy? Yes.
100%.
We know that.
That's indisputable.
Right? I mean, come on.
Stormy Daniels, all of those beauty pageants, grab them in the peas, all of it.
All of it.
Yeah.
He was nasty. He still is. He always was. The guy was from New York, and he grew up in a time frame where that was allowed.
Women were objectified. Yeah.
Sure. That was allowed. I mean, that was allowed. It was allowed. It was acceptable. And that was his brand, and that's who he was, right? And by the way, he was given a lot of grace. And he's given a lot of forgiveness, and no one said anything about that.
Even by his own wife, bro. She knew about a lot of that stuff.
Yes. And
shout out to Melania.
and by the way, people only became critical of the way he was with women after he ran for president the first time.
Facts.
Right?
Well, I think, yes. And like, for example, to your point, he was on Howard Stern all the time. Nobody's going to hold that against him but the thing is that as a president, there's a different set of expectations, just like if a person becomes a pastor, there's a different set of expectations. If a person, is working with little kids or working with young females, but in their past, they talked about objectifying women, you're going to look at that a little sideways. Don't you think that's fair?
No, because you're bringing up presidential conduct, and you're not even talking about Biden or Obama. Come on.
Okay.
There's so much. Come on. Okay. Let's just leave it. Let's leave it at this then. If we're going to presidential conduct, I get it versus nothing that's provable. But we all know now if that's the case, and we can't even hold Biden to his own actions, we'd have to hold his administrators. Guy clearly had dementia for the last year. At least. I'm not a doctor of that type, and I won't diagnose, but there is clearly some cognitive decline. There's no doubt about that for sure. Yes, and objectified women, but there's so many.
I agree. And I think that those types of behaviors should be held to account. Like, just because you're a Democrat, like, I'm not even a registered Democrat. I'm independent. So for me, man, it's about the issues. It's not about the party. I don't have any allegiance to any party. I don't have allegiance to the independent party. Just because I'm an independent thinker, that's the reason why I registered that way. So Biden, he's had some objectionable types of behaviors. If you take a look at his record with civil rights and who he's aligned himself with, historically and all of that stuff. And Kamala Harris, even during the debates called him out for what he did with busing and all of those things. And all of those things are objectionable. So I think regardless, if you're the president, you have to be held in high regard. You don't have to be judged for past mistakes from the standpoint of holding that against you. But if there are telltale signs that create the perception that you still may exhibit those behaviors and you use your powers to take advantage of that, that's where the problem is. So, when Trump was on the bus and he was talking about you can grab them by the peas and all that stuff. Okay. If you said that 20 years ago, but you had a major personality shift and you got saved and changed your life and turned it around, cool. Everybody makes mistakes. Ain't none of us perfect. But if there's still a lot of remnants of that type of behavior and it seems like it's crept in, and now because you're the most powerful man in the world, that matters. That matters.
But I think that his behavior is, I mean, for example, I think that he's probably at his best. I've never seen him. I think from a presidential standpoint and how he conducts himself, I think he's probably at his best I've ever seen him at. So I have to give him that credit. He's very polished and he's very changed.
He's more polished. I wouldn't say he's very polished, but relative to before, he has definitely, on the presidential continuum, he's definitely become more presidential relative to his first term. I'll give you that.
So I think in that, especially in today's medium, having social media and news outlets and transparent, look, if you compared him, and the one thing you can say about Trump, and no one can argue with this, because you could pull up videos of Trump in the 80s and the 90s, he is still the same as far as policy thinking and how he thinks and how things should be done.
I give you that.
Right? Now, having said that, if we're going to objectify or hold to the standard of presidential concept, I'd say one of the biggest aspects of President Trump that you could hold him against is his objectification of women. I give you that. Well, if we're going to compare presidents to presidents, and we only know what we know, put Kennedy in that too, because he objectified women, and it is facts that he had affairs.
Yeah, no doubt. Except for, there wasn't social media and worldwide media like it was. No doubt. I give you that for sure.
So put Kennedy in today's.
No doubt. He would be
open
but I would say the difference is that Kennedy, even though he was a womanizer, most likely, he definitely carried himself with a certain decorum that was fit for the presidency. And so, I think that with Trump, one thing that people respect about him is that he's a fighter. Yes. And for someone who likes a strong man leader, he fits that. And that's what was attractive for many of his base about him. But the problem is that as a strong man but a strong man who's a narcissist, that's where the problems come in, because his agenda is more important than everything else and everybody else. And the moment you cross him and the moment you try to challenge his authority, you will get stepped on and you will get pushed to the side. And as a president, you have to be more of a unifier. Like if you're a CEO of a company and that's the attitude you want to take, it's your company. So if you're working for him, you either take it and shut up or you leave. And so, like I've heard some people comparing running a country to running a company. They're not the same. They're not the same because as when you run a company, you're the authority. In a highly functioning democracy, the people are the authority and the people are the ones. And that's the thing that's so delicate about a properly functioning democracy, which this is not. And what I mean by that specifically, it is a republic. But even as a republic, it's supposed to be of the people, by the people, and for the people. And the people in Congress, the House and the Senate, what they've shown by and large is that they're of themselves, for themselves, to the detriment even of their constituency, unless that's something that gets them unelected.
Yeah,
I got a problem with that.
I think that Trump is I think that Trump is a recipe for success right now, because I don't think anybody could have done what he's done. I don't think anybody is number one. America. I don't think anybody. I think for him to have an agenda the way he does, you need that right now. And I also think you need a bully right now. And I think he's been the most unifying president that we've had in a very long time. And now the way
unifying,
yes.
Okay, please explain that. I totally disagree with that.
Here's why I'm saying this. And we might be off topic on this, but I still have to get back to why I think why I think what the theory is and why he doesn't release it. Because I think the worst case scenario, obviously, he might be a passenger on the manifest list, right? From a while ago, a long time ago. But I think he's a unifying president simply because you are getting stuff done now. You're getting stuff done in the UN. So you're getting stuff done both internationally, and you're getting stuff done domestically. You have immigration policies being enforced again. You have bills being passed on a bipartisan level. And you have the UN increasing their budget, which we haven't seen happen. Now, I think he's the most unifying president that we've had in a long time, simply because he is accomplishing things and getting unification done through force. Whereas if you look at the unifying thing that Reagan accomplished, or a unifying process that Clinton may have had, or more so Reagan, is that unification was done through power.
So when you're talking about unification, what are you referring to? Because like when I think about Reagan, I think about what he did by force is the
I think he accomplished
Berlin Wall, right?
I think that was accomplished through power. I think Reagan had a lot more power, and Trump has a lot more force to him.
Okay, all right.
People are more afraid of him to do it, because here's the reality behind it, right? The people are coming together and are working together and are accomplishing things and are in lockstep more now because they have to be, because they know they don't have anywhere to go. His coalition is solid. He has a popular vote. He has a congressional majority. He has a Senate majority, right? He has both majorities, and he also has won with a electoral college. So you can't argue the way he won, right? So he has a mandate that carries.
But that's not unifying. You haven't said anything yet that's unifying. The Republican Party has taken over the congressional seats, yes, and the Republicans have a majority, but that isn't necessarily. I haven't heard anything yet that you've said that suggests that he's unified. What has he unified?
He unified the country for a popular vote. I mean, if you win a popular vote, that's a sign of unification. That's an early sign of unification, because you can't win a popular vote just by getting one party, right? So you had to create some unification there. And I think the unification was done with transparency, straightforward thinking government, less on the left side of the weird fringe, and getting people to get things done in a way where, look, guys, we all have to get done on the same page. And I think you're seeing that with the UN stuff, where he's got a NATO alliance where he's got these guys to increase their budgets. That's unification. You've got these guys say, okay, grumbling on, we're finally going to put more money into this. Yes, we've got a fair. That's a massive foreign policy accomplishment.
Okay, but Chris,
that's unification.
He ran on an America First agenda. What you're talking about with the UN, that's the United Nations. That's a foreign policy issue. And I agree that other countries need to pay their fair share as it relates to the amount of money that's being placed for different, ideas and concepts and products and processes to be fulfilled throughout the world. I understand that. I agree with that part. But when we talk about unification, especially for a person that runs on the America First agenda, I haven't heard anything that the Democratic Party and the Republican parties are lockstep on at all. Now, I'm not blaming him specifically for that. I want to be very clear when I say that, because right now where we are as a country, you have the far right and you have the far left, and they're both crazy. There's this silent middle that's being pushed to the fringes, and they're just being pansies and wimps. And I think what needs to happen is there needs to be on center right and center left that come together on specific issues that allows both parties to say, okay, here are 5, 6, 7 items that we can agree on. Like, I believe that in a weird way, on accident, Epstein is a unifying concept, because people on the right and people on the left agree with that. However, the files still haven't been released, and that's still a problem.
And here's getting back to that, here's my point on why I think, and this is where I strongly believe in it. This is just my gut feeling of it.
Okay.
Because I don't think there's anything in there that says he's a pedophile. Because he's just not in his character. You see him.
I'm not going to jump to judgment. I think there's a possibility that he messed with some underage girls. But if you were to say, gun to my head, am I willing to die on that belief that he's a pedophile? I would be more willing to say that he's not, because he's even said when he was on Howard Stern, hey, he did say, hey, they're on the younger side and stuff like that. But he said, that's not really what I'm into. I'm more into the ones that are, 25 and up. That's kind of my area. And that was way back then before he was married. So I would agree with you. I don't think he's a pedophile either. I am concerned that there is something there though. It's just such a crazy reason why. And when I say something there, like, I think there is some circumstantial information that could be construed or misconstrued as being incriminating. And I think that would be the challenge for him, is that now you have to prove that you're innocent, as opposed to if there's no information there, you're innocent until you're proven guilty. And he's not even, in any, he hasn't even been indicted in the court of public opinion about being a pedophile, because even people on the left, that's not something they're saying. So I would agree with you on that.
Yeah. And there's no circumstantial or substantial evidence there. And here's the thing, because the left side had these files first. The Biden's DOJ knows this too. They would have crucified this guy.
100%.
Crucified the shit out of this guy. So my theory here is that he was going to do it. And he's been very brash about everything else right now. But I think that the people that are on that list are just so far gone and too far up and too ingrained in certain systems of the world, Len, that I just think that he's got those phone calls, and he got those phone calls because, even though he's the president of the United States, there's still those powers that be around that went, we just can't do this. Because
do you agree with, let's say your theory is true. Okay. Do you believe he's justified in that, assuming that your theory is correct?
Okay. Here's why I think that's the case. Because how do I want to say this the right way? It's kind of like one of those situations where if you knew the truth, or if you do this, the whole system will collapse, right?
How though?
Give you an example. Almost like a pure markets, a pure 100% pure free market capitalist system would not have allowed TARP to work, or TARP to happen, right?
Correct.
Troubled Asset Release Program, right? Bail out the banks. It would have been screw it. Let them freaking fail.
Car companies would have fallen. Ford, Chrysler,
GM would have been out of business.
GM,
Ford
all
out
of
business.
Yeah.
But in 2008, we saved banks because why? Because it was too big to fail, right? And if we would have let it fail, it would have created so much chaos in the system, right? How we know it, that every kind of almost like Ghostbusters, right?
And did you agree with that being done? Did you agree with that part? The bailouts? Did you agree with that?
No, I don't. I don't agree with the bailouts.
Okay.
I don't agree with the bailouts. I don't.
Right.
I am a vehemently opposed bailouts, right?
I think the bailout should have happened because of the point you brought up. I think it would have crashed the economy. And I think that there's a reason that we needed to make sure that those companies stayed afloat. And I think the sanctions or the penalty should have been more strict, because, like, for example, with American General that was really AIG that became American General, their CEOs acted in such a disruptively inappropriate behavior, because what happened is, they were given all these different bonuses and flying all over the place, and they were acting so irresponsibly with the money. In a situation like that, I think that bailout should have been revoked, and they should have been able to be allowed to go under. But then when you think about these car companies and all of the workers that were there, I just think there would have been so much of economic calamity. So here's my question to you. So you disagreed with the bailouts because you feel like, okay, let the markets decide what's going on, allow capitalistic intuition and instincts and all of that stuff to take over, let the chips fall where they may. Where do you stand with these so-called powerful people who may be on those files? Where do you stand?
Right. So I'm in the same accord in that let it out. Okay. Let it out because here's the thing. I'm not an economist. I'm not a banker. But what I do know is that when you had these banks go and we had these financial crises, Chase was fine. There was no problem with Chase Bank. And for the most part, Wells Fargo was okay too. It wasn't until after a few years later we found out the issues with Wells Fargo was opening accounts without people's right. But by and large, Chase Bank was good. So what you would have had happen is you probably would have had all these banks buy these banks that were failing, and they wouldn't have been manipulated, and you would have had a forced reorganization of this crazy ass system that's happening. And again, you saved them, and it's happening again. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are still there, and it's happening again, and these banks are lending money, and it's happening again. These people that are on this list, they're in such massive positions of power that they're so untouchable because they deal in a world that we don't talk about. They don't deal in the world of money anymore. It's all in a world of influence now. Money is nothing to these people. Money is nothing to them.
So you're okay with the files being released and allowing them to be exposed
100%.
Regardless of the calamity?
Yes, because at some point you're going to see big things. You're going to see you are going to, if we knew who was on that list, dichotomies would change, paradigms would change, companies would change, ways of living and doing business would change in such a dramatic way. Like you said, it's the same argument that you have for the banks. They're too big to fail, and you would have had all these things happen, and these companies would have failed. These people being exposed is the same exact thing.
Okay.
It's going to create the same type of effect.
You think so? I mean, to me, I believe that any no, I don't want to do that. I think any person could be replaced. I think any person could be replaced. If you can replace the president of the United States, if you can replace name any CEO of any large company, not suggesting at all that any of them are on the list.
I agree.
While they may be, they can be replaced.
I agree. But imagine if it was a bunch of companies and imagine if it was this. Okay, here's a better way to say it. Imagine if 60% of them from all those areas and those sectors are involved.
Okay.
You get what I'm saying?
Let's play that out.
Like imagine if it was like, for example, imagine if it's 40 to 50% of high influential people in multiple areas of life. And
in what circumstance would they not be able to be replaced? You take all of them, their names are exposed. There's a VP of operations. There's the second in line that had nothing to do with it. There are people now, the company may lose a lot of shares, I think definitely the stock market would significantly be impacted. But those companies, if they're good companies, they'd still survive.
That's the same argument, though, you could make, Len, for the banks. If you don't bail these banks out, there are other banks waiting in the wings to buy them and absorb them and repurpose the way the market's being ran.
I was okay with some of the companies going under, like Bear Stearns.
But see, that's the argument. It's an all or nothing. It's a binary.
I think it's
right because this guy isn't too big, but this guy is. Right? I mean, there are names on that list, I think, that are at the highest levels where it would challenge social and economic. It would challenge everything so hardcore that I believe it would be like the Matrix being unplugged. It would just complete failure.
All right, so let's do a brain exercise, okay? See if you follow me. So let's say, without naming any real person, because the reason why, I don't have any fear of putting anybody's name out there. The thing is I don't like to put something on somebody that's, hypothetical, right? You know what I mean?
Of course.
So let's just say you have this gigantic, let's say there's 20 gigantic companies. I'm talking multi-billion, trillion-dollar companies. Okay. So there's only a couple of trillion-dollar companies right now. So let's say all of the trillion-dollar companies, these hypothetical companies are there. These, the top 20 companies, let's say every single one of them were on the files. What's the calamity? What's the breakout? Like, what's the fallout because of the fact that they're found out to be on the list? What happens?
What's the fallout?
Yeah.
Well, I think the fallout is I think the fallout, we can't even possibly imagine the fallout. We can't possibly imagine the butterfly effect. Like, for example, let me give you an example here.
All right.
Look at just how much fallout and repercussion is happening as a result of the astronomer CEO scandal. You know what I'm talking about, right?
The astronomer CEO, oh yeah, the one where they were caught on
the kiss cam, right? Look at how much fallout is happening as a result of that we couldn't even possibly imagine. For example, so what? He was on the kiss cam with his HR person. So what? He's a great executive and she's a great executive. So what? They were having an extramarital affair, and you can't even prove that they were having an extramarital affair. They were caught on the kiss cam. He was holding her. She was holding her. We're all adults. We know what was happening, but you can't prove that anything was happening. But as a result, he's resigning. She's resigning. The person who booked the tickets got fired, supposedly, right? Look at all these repercussions that are happening. He was obviously a great executive of that company, right? Otherwise, they wouldn't have let him go just because of a possible misconduct, right? Because he was married. Well, I'm not saying what he did was right, but look at all that fallout that's happening as a result of that. Look at all the different stuff that's happening now. Everybody's making fun of it. There's even some tension there with Coldplay, like, hey, you shouldn't have done that, and all of that's there. And now everybody's making all these spoofs and he's making fun of it with the sports teams. That's a lot of no one could possibly predict the memes, everything that's happening in that, the fallout that's as a result of that, because he was caught on a kiss cam, right?
Okay. I hear what you're saying.
Just think about it for a second here.
Okay.
You're not just talking about CEOs. You're talking about heads of state, religious leaders. There are so many people involved in this Epstein file stuff, and that it would shake core foundations in so many different places, because I don't think anybody would be left out. I think it's rotten across all the boards, because I think that this Epstein thing happened at a time where there were no rules. Rules.
Okay, so let's take the fact that there are probably heads of state, there are probably other kings, or other dignitaries
we know there are some dignitaries because
in other countries,
their royal powers.
Right. Without naming names, but
without naming names.
Okay, let's take all of that
because they've seen the list.
Yeah, I believe that. And let's say that there's also church leaders. Okay,
100% there is.
Now let's take the damage of that reality, which is if the files are released, those people would be shamed. But let's compare that to this whole issue right now that we face in our country is a general distrust of the government and of the people who are supposed to represent us. And so when you have such a low approval rating of the Senate and the House and Congress and government, democracy, the whole fabric of democracy only lasts and it only survives because of trust. The very foundation of our dollar, even though because it's a fiat currency, the only reason why it survives is because of trust. If there's no trust, then why would I go vote? And if I don't go vote, then there is a deterioration of democracy itself. And people say, anybody who studies history and anybody who understands democracy understands that it is very, very fragile. And when you're in a situation where the general population does not trust the people they elected to place in power, then the only logical next set of steps is that it could be a revolution. I'm not suggesting that that's going to happen here, but how many revolutions in the past were predicted? Usually it was a rising of tension, and then there was an event that tipped the scale and everything fell apart. And when you look at where our country's going, when you look at one, you have two political parties that are breaking off into extreme factions. You have a general distrust in the government. You have people that are in power saying one thing and doing another from both parties. And now you have the people who have elected these people to represent us saying, this is what we're demanding as a population, and you're not doing it. Why should we even participate in this political process? So yes, there would be fallout from these folks being exposed. I would suggest that pales in comparison to the potential fallout based on an erosion of trust.
I think it's the opposite, and I think that he's put in a position where he's got to pick the lesser of the two evils. And that is,
the lesser of the two evils is allowing these people to be exposed, because at least it says, look, we said that we were going to release the files.
That's the point. That's the point that I get stuck on, because you operated on that. And that's why my theory makes the most sense to me in my head, where I'm just like, well, it makes sense you ran on this, but then you went, holy shit, this is who's on this list. We can't do this. And I can't help but believe that there are forces and powers that be at a high financial level and a high intellectual level that said there's just no way you can release those. There's just no way you can. And I think that's why we're stuck here with it. But at the same time, I believe that, yes, it needs to be released. But I think that if it does get released, I think that there's so much scandal and so much BS that'll come out of it that people will be more angry if they actually knew. It's kind of almost like, I think it's a situation where it's like, people are going to be angry whether we release them or not, but I think they're going to be even more angry if we do release them. And I think that's where we're at. I think that's where we're stuck at. It's a shitty situation, but I think that's where we're at right now, where it's like, it's going to be, they're going to be more mad if they know the truth than if we don't give them the whole truth. And I think that's why he pandered and broke and motioned for that, like late Sunday, or I think it was, or maybe I think it was late Sunday or Saturday, where he motioned for the public grand jury transcripts to be released, or for Pam Bundy to release them. I think that's the latest thing now, where they're going to release the grand jury transcripts, or they're going to release the grand jury information. Come on, man, we're not dumb, bro. Like, okay, releasing the grand. It's going to pacify 80% of people, though. I mean, I don't think so, bro. I don't think so. I disagree with that. I believe, because everything that I've seen in the media, everything that I've read, everything that I've watched, I have not heard one group of people that says, oh, okay, that's awesome, they're releasing the grand jury information. No. That's a small subset of the real data that's out there, bro. I don't think anybody's buying it. And I think that, okay, so the question I was going to ask you was, let's say you're the president and you know beyond a shadow of a doubt that there's no possible way you could release the files, because, you know, if something is happening and it's terrible and I don't know about it, I live life as though everything's, you know, rose petals and green skies, and life is better for me just being ignorant. And you as the president know that, and it's better for me not to know. How would you, if you're in power, how would you handle that fact? How would you communicate to your country? Man, that's such a tough situation to be in, because I don't know all the details, but I could just assume that let me tell you how I'd handle it if I was operating under the same assumption that I'm operating under.
That's what I'm asking you. Yeah.
I'm operating.
This is all hypothetical.
Okay, and again, I'm operating under the fact that I think there are people on this list that if we say this stuff, there's going to be world wars, or there's something to that effect. I think that those people I think if I'm president of the United States, I'd have to honor the transparency thing, and I would have to put. I think I would have to accomplish it in a way in that say, look, we ran on a campaign of transparency. We said we were going to release these files, but I'd be honest. I mean, I'd have to be honest and say, look, here's the challenge, and here's the challenge with it. You're going to see people, places, events, circumstances, and names that are going to challenge the core foundations of a lot of different beliefs and a lot of different dichotomies and a lot of different things. But I want you to understand that everybody's human, and unless there's hard evidence to accuse these people of this, or unless there's an accuser that comes forward then that was hurt by this person, right? Then you got to understand these people got to live with that. But here's the list, and here's the accusations, and let the details fall where the details fall. And
oh, okay. Yeah. So you would release them. That's interesting.
I wouldn't be able to live with myself otherwise. I mean, because here's the thing: if I didn't,
what I'm saying, Chris, is you. Okay, let me be more clear. I'm saying that you are the president of the United States, and you know what we don't, and you know for a fact that America as a superpower or an economic power would cease to exist. I'm talking the most extreme hypothetical. If this information was found, because it would rock the very core of who we are as a nation, and different nations throughout the world would be rocked, and World War III could happen because revolutions and all of this stuff would happen. Yeah. Let's take the most extreme. Okay. And as a result of that, you knew beyond a shadow of a doubt, there's no possible way that you could release those files. How would you communicate to us as a country that you were not going to release those files?
And I think that's where you get down to the fact that people are so fickle, and that you elected this man because you trusted him to do what you needed to do, or do what he needed to do. And that's where you kind of have faith in all the decision-making process that he's doing, because we don't know all the details. We only know what we know, right? We only know what we're allowed to know, and we only know what we hear. So in that case, I would just be very transparent and honest and say, look, you know what? You elected me because you trust me. You elected me because I ran on this. We're going to be fully transparent, but here, I'm going to be fully transparent with you. Here's the list that we're going to release, but there are certain individuals on here that we can't release for the health of the country and the health of the world. And you just have to trust that process, that they're being dealt with in other ways. They're just being dealt with in other ways. And you've got to trust that process, and you got to make an example out of whoever you can make an example out of. And those people that you can't unmask because they would challenge that. You have to explain that to people in a way where you got to say, look, you got to understand it, and you just got to trust it, but rest assured that they are being dealt with. And then the people that deal with that person, or those people have to be dealt with in a private setting amongst those higher powers that be, because there's things that operate at a level that we're never going to understand, and we can never even try to understand it, because we're not in that room, and we're not forced to make those decisions, right? Kind of almost like when Lincoln wanted to pen that letter to his generals during the Civil War, and he wanted to write scathing letters, but he tore them up and he never sent them, because he's not there on the battlefield. He's not there on the front line, right? And we're not there as well on the front line of whatever president. It could be Biden, it could be Obama, it could be Clinton. We're not there making all those decisions. We're backseat drivers, right? We're in that regards, right? We're side seat drivers. We're watching the game of chess without actually playing the game of chess. So I think it's a very sensitive subject, but at that point, I would find a way to release as much as I could and be as transparent as I could. Say, look, you're not going to get all the information. And I'm telling you up front, you're not going to get all the information, because there's just certain things that we can't do, because we just can't do it. And given today's climate, you got to respect Trump in that also too, because given today's world climate, given everything that's happening today in the world climate with Israel and Russia and Ukraine and everything that's happening there, it is an extremely horrible time to throw that into the pot, because you could very well spark something like that with what's on that list, I think.
And see that, so I agree with how you would handle it, because I think as a country, we understand that you have classified, highly classified, and top secret levels of classification. We understand that different people have different levels of security clearance. We also suspect that there's information that's out there that was never released to us because it wasn't time and we weren't ready for it, right? When you look at the Vietnam War, when you look at JFK, when you look at all of these different actual conspiracies, when you look at COINTELPRO,
there's a reason why that was delayed, right?
Exactly. So when you look at, Martin Luther King, when you look at Malcolm X, the government knows what happened, and there's a reason why they didn't release the files. Now, while we may not completely agree with why they didn't release it, we're grown enough to know that there are things that are above our pay grade. And so in this case, when you try to minimize or insult our intelligence, that's what I have an issue with. When you tell me that the files are on your desk and then you tell me that what you said is not what you said, that's what I have an issue with. And right. When you tell me that we need to move on, and why are we talking about this creep, and we need to move on and talk about something different, or that the Dems did it, you're insulting my intelligence. And when you tell me that we just need to move on, just tell me, look, listen, there are certain things that are on those files that are highly classified. And as we read through them, they're actually top secret, and it would create calamity beyond anything you could possibly imagine. And I know that's not the answer you wanted, but as your president, as your leader, as the person who has access to this information, in good conscience, I could not allow that to be let out. And I understand that there are going to be many of you that are not going to like that decision. And I understand that. And I'm willing and able to deal with the repercussions of that. But in good conscience is just not something I can do. Just tell us that, just give us the fact that you're not going to tell us. Just give us that level of the benefit of the doubt to suggest that we're intelligent enough to process that. Now, I wouldn't like that answer, but that's better than insulting my intelligence and just telling me there's no there. Stop it. It's insulting.
I think that's the best answer to give, because then you do also solve the transparency thing, where it's like, look, guys, we want to release this stuff, but the fact is, it's just so ugly, we can't. And it'll just do more harm than it is. But rest assured, we are dealing with those people. Because I think at this point, it almost becomes too much of a gotcha in a show now, where it's like, gotcha, we need to release this. And we've overblown it now to the point where I just think that what's on those lists is so serious that it will create too much more chaos. It's more harm harm done to release it publicly now than to leave it and let us deal with it on the back end.
Yeah,
I think
I'm inclined to agree with that, and I know we've got to put this issue to bed.
We've been on this for a minute.
We have, but to me, it's not just the files, though. That's the reason why this story is so big. It's the principle. It's so many levels, because when you have an administration where the actual people who are in the position to release the files were the same ones that said we should release them, but now all of a sudden they've completely changed their tune. It reeks to high heaven that there's some cover up, and it looks really bad. It looks really bad. Yes. And it just, it just goes to show that when you're not in a real position of power, where there are real world when there's real world consequences of your actions and the information you share, it really suggests that they really understand that there are real world consequences to that information being released. But the problem is we kind of already know, we kind of already believe that already. So just be one of the first. If you're going to be a transformative and you're going to be an administration that's different and transparent, then just tell us, look, you guys trust us. You don't want to see what's on there. It's terrible. And then what I would do in the background, yes. And what I would do in the background is I would do everything I could to find somebody to serve as, there's got to be some showing that justice is being sought after as opposed to being kicked under the carpet. Because where we're left to think as a society, as a country, is that the rich and powerful get away with everything and they're able to kick things under the rug and make stuff go away. And those that don't have the power and the influence and the representation, we get screwed and we get thrown in jail and we get, made a public mockery out of, and we don't have any wiggle room, and it's just unfair. And all this does is it just fuels that distrust.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And I think that you insult everyone's intelligence by doing the whole, oh, it's silly. And that's where I have an issue, where I'm like, it wasn't freaking silly before, dude. And we understand it's a serious conversation. We understand it's a serious thing. But yeah, let's at least say, hey, look, these people are dealing with it. It's ugly. You guys don't need to know about it.
Yeah,
I think we
absolutely.
cover one more topic, or we could kind of.
Yeah, let's do. I think what we'll probably do is end up cutting this into different segments and things like that. So I think we can put this to bed. But I also think that it's important to come back to this topic as information unfolds, and let's talk about just how we're processing that and sharing our differing perspectives on it, because I think that people need to, my hope is that people get smarter by watching this.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you on that one. So, I mean, at this point, I think the biggest thing is just really just having that transparency and knowing that you're not always going to get what you want, but at the same time, maybe we'll see how the direction with it goes. One thing I can tell you though, when situations like this happen, as you listen to this, going back to it as we wrap up on it, is it is just really a distraction. And for me, I remember living through 9/11. I remember living through the dot-com bubble. I remember living through the real estate crisis of 2008. I remember living through COVID, right? I remember living through even the election and all that stuff, and all these different things that have gone on. What I can always come back to is that these either will be distractions for you as a professional, or whether you're working for yourself or whether you're working for someone else or working for someone else in a W-2. At the end of the day, how is this impacting your life? Right? And as a professional, whether you're running a business or you're or you're working for somebody else, don't get so enamored with this and don't get stuck on this and all those things, because whether Donald Trump was the president or Joe Biden was the president or Barack Obama was the president or George W. Bush Jr. was the president or even Clinton was the president. I think Clinton was still the president when I first started working. It didn't matter who was president. It didn't matter. It did not matter at all. And so far, I mean, obviously this year is not over yet, but I mean, I made a lot of money during a Republican president, and I made a lot of money during a Democratic president. So to me, it doesn't really matter what world issue was going on or political issue was going on or economic crisis was going on. I always found a way to be productive and make money. So I shifted with the economy, and I shifted with the current world of market, and I got better and I stayed ahead of it always. I didn't allow the current circumstances and the current economic circumstances or world market circumstances to dictate my success. And I think that is probably, maybe if I'm sitting here listening to that, that's probably one of the biggest key takeaways I would want you to get out of this conversation is, regardless of everything you talked about today, at the end of the day, the most important thing is, what are you doing to improve your life, both spiritually, family-wise, and business and financially? What are you doing to do those things right now and not getting distracted with this, allowing this to be something that it prevents you from being productive, right?
Yeah, I agree with that. And the way I put it is that there's broadly two different types of people. You either a victim or you're an agent. And when I talk about agent, I'm talking about agency and being able to have control over the decisions you make and the effort you put in and the strategies that you decide to execute so that life can become better. Having said that, I do believe that while you say it's a distraction, I would say for those families and those victims that completely changed their life. For us that weren't victimized, you're absolutely right. It is a distraction. And I think that we have to be careful in how we talk about it, because there is nuance, because I think that we have to operate with a certain level of empathy for the victims, because there are definitely victims, because, you know, even regardless of what you believe about Epstein being killed or killing himself, he was a victim on a certain level. But what he did to all of those young girls and creating an enterprise that allowed other people to sexually harm other girls, all of those families and all of their husbands and all of their parents and all of their relatives, they're forever going to be changed. And so we have to be empathetic to that. Now, having said that, it's also important for us to understand, to your point, Chris, that regardless of a Republican being a president, a Democrat being a president, has no bearing on success whatsoever. And if you think that the government is going to take care of you, if you think that a certain president is going to make your life better, then you're acting from a victim mindset. Now, there are situations where presidents do things that do victimize and harm people. When you talk about our history here as African Americans in you know, from 1619, even up to present day, but specifically during the Reconstruction era and also during the Civil Rights era, there were specific actions and laws that targeted us as a people to stop our progression. And in those situations, yes, we were victimized. But even though that's the truth, we have a responsibility as individuals in general and as African Americans, and I speak from the perspective of African American male in particular. I have a responsibility to not allow the laws of the land and the leaders of our government to determine the level of success I have. Screw that. They don't control me. They don't have any dictation over, they don't have any say over how much success I have or not. They don't have any bearing on that. And I say that with a complete understanding. And I know my history. I study our history. And so we've got to be able to see both sets of realities. When you have a government that talks about taking away books that talks about slavery, no, you'll never hear them talking about taking away books that talked about the Holocaust. And I'm not going to be one that conflates the two or tries to do any comparison. You don't want to negate any history, but you also don't want to allow a history that's real, that had a real impact on our people and on your people, depending upon what group you come from. You don't want to forget about that, but you also don't want to use that as a crutch that stops you from achieving anything that you set out to do. And that's a weird, almost, you know, like, it's almost like two different personas that I have to take on, because on the one hand, I see a lot of people who completely say, let's not even talk about slavery. Let's not even talk about history. Let's not talk about any of that stuff because it has nothing to do with where we are right now. No, that's not true, because it all bears itself out. But at the same time, that does not limit the success that I can have or that other people can have to that regard. So
we'll see you guys on the next one.
Yep. And all I would say in wrapping up is, if you liked what you heard, share it with somebody. And maybe if you disagreed with something I said or disagreed with something that Chris said, or vice versa, you agreed, we'd also like to hear from you. One thing that we really want to do as we grow is, if you continue to engage with us, we're going to continue to bring content and information. And our number one goal is to bring value to you. And so any way that we can do that, we want to do that. So make sure you like, make sure you comment, make sure you share. And as Chris said, with that, till next time, take care.
Conversation has given you clarity on your next steps. Please share this episode with someone who's walking the same path. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss future episodes. And remember, planning ahead isn't just prudent, it's an act of care. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time on The Family Office.